Today what we're going to do is we're going to start setting up our test environment to use going forward for the pen testing activities. And once we understand these pen testing activities, we are going to then extend this to harden our own web stack. Basically, we're going to harden what we have running in the Stung blog software. And then we're going to test that hardening to ensure that we have put in place, proper mitigations against some of the more obvious vulnerabilities that one might find on a website. If you have downloaded the Metasploitable.ova file, I apologize, but could you download it again? Okay. It's not critical. You don't have to. It's better if you understand what the difference is and adapt, because frankly, at the end of the day, pen testing is understanding your results and adapting accordingly. So it's not the end of the world by any stretch. But I uploaded the wrong one, and I've now uploaded the correct one, which has a little bit better selection when it comes to doing some password cracking that we're going to try and get to today. So if you've already downloaded the Metasploitable.ova, please download again. You should also have, everybody can hear me, yeah?
Yep.
Awesome, perfect. You should also have your Kali downloaded as well. So we're going to go ahead and first off, we're going to install Kali. Now, when you take a look at the Kali website, should have typed in the other way, but that's okay. If you go to the Kali download sites, near the bottom, they have pre-canned versions of Kali for VirtualBox. And when you go to that, you can actually download an OVA file, something we're going to see today. So you don't, strictly speaking, have to go through the installer, but I'm going to ask you to go through the installer for today's class, please. And this is pretty normal. We install the tools that we're going to use, in this case Kali, and then we import the target machines that we are going to attack because they come pre-canned. So we're going to look at both of those today. First, installing Kali. Kali is a 64-bit version of Ubuntu. The easiest way to change the settings here, and I apologize that I can't zoom this in anymore, but the easiest actually, that makes sense. I'll just do that. The easiest way would be to select, you could go Linux and then scroll through and find Ubuntu 64. But the easiest way is just to type UB. And as soon as you get to the B in Ubuntu, it says, oh, you want a 64-bit version of Ubuntu. Perfect. Now that I have it, I can type in Kali. And then you can type that in as your machine name as well. I'm going to type in bitkali section 2, just so that I can delineate my activities between the two different sections. We then click on next. You don't want 1 gig of RAM. You want 8, or if you can afford it, 16 gig. I'm only going to give myself 8 gig of RAM because if I have it too fast, I get too fast ahead of you that don't have that kind of RAM. So I'm going to give myself 8,192 megabytes or 8 gig of RAM. You can use the slider. It has some partial stops at the key points. You want to create the virtual disk. The default is fine. The default VDI is fine. Dynamic, the default is fine. It's on this tab that we run into problems. 10 gig is probably not enough. You want to give yourself 20 gig of drive space. 20 gig is a bit of overkill, but it's okay. We're doing dynamic sizing, so it's only going to grow as necessary up to 20 gig. You could give yourselves hundreds of gigs of drive space. We're probably never ever going to use it, but that always seems like a bit of a risk thing for me. At that point, you can click on Create. Again, how did I do this? Click File, Machine, New. Click on the New button here, or just simply inside a VirtualBox, hit Control End. I type UB so that it defaults to a 64-bit version of Ubuntu, and then I change it to the name I want. You can call it Kali. Okay. Click on Next. I recommend 8 gig of memory if you can afford it. If you can afford more, it's not a bad idea. You want to use the defaults. Create the disk. Default. VDI. Default. Dynamic. Default. It's on the size you want to change to 20 gigabytes. It'll be more like 21 or 22 gigabytes, but that's fine. Click on Create, and you now have a virtual machine created. Before we start it up, we need to modify the settings, just like we had with Debian. Alright, general is fine. If you want, you can add some kind of description, set some encryption, but we're fine with it as it is. It's on the system one that we want to start looking. The second tab is called processors. Mine's, because of the scaling I did, it's not visible. But what you want to do is maybe give yourself 2 cores. We will do some password cracking with Kali, so having more processing resources is probably a good thing. The display, it sets to 16 meg. We want to give ourselves more. I would say give ourselves 128 megabytes of RAM. The VMS VGA video adapter should be fine. It's on the storage and on the networking that the changes become really important. The other ones are nice to do's. Again, give yourself a second processor, give yourself 128 megabytes of RAM. It's on storage that you want to select the CD-ROM, the optical image, and then on the drop down you want to choose a disk file. Once you do that, go to where your downloads are, wherever you downloaded your ISO installer, and select the Kali 2020.3 installer for the AMD 64 ISO, the 3.9 gig or 3.8 gig file that we downloaded. Alright, click on Open and click on OK. So now we've got the correct installer CD specified. The last change we want to make is to our network. When we take a look at this diagram right here, this explains quite nicely what we're trying to achieve in this class. We run our host environment, which for most of you is probably Windows. Within that host environment, we run some kind of virtualization. For most of you, that's VirtualBox. I know some of you are going to use VMware. That's fine. It's about technique, not tools. Inside that virtualized area, we're going to run Kali, and we're going to run some target machine that we can attack. It's the same setup for Debian. Kali could also just as easily be Debian or any other system. A system that often requires internet access, so we ensure that we have a NAT adapter for that machine so it can talk to the internet. We also ensure that the machine that we're going to use for attacking, in this case Kali, can talk on our host-only network. Also, Metasploitable or any other machine that we want to attack can talk on the host-only network. Now, I used to have Metasploitable talk to the cloud, but there's no value in that. I no longer bother with that. If I'm going to attack a machine, I make sure it's able to be seen on the host-only network. So not only can Kali talk to it, but Windows can talk to it as well. All right? You could just as easily have done this with bridge networks, but I prefer to delineate my traffic when I'm doing these kinds of things. It's important when you're doing pen testing. I feel it is critical when you're doing malware analysis that you delineate the traffic of your target machine and make sure that it can only talk to the machines you want it to talk to. So this setup is very important in these kinds of technical analyses that we do in information security. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? All right. If anybody wants to record this, go ahead, but as you saw, I'm already recording this on my computer. So, what does that mean for us? Well, we need to have 2 adapters. Adapter 1 is attached to NAT, that's fine. We need to enable adapter 2, enable it, and attach it to our host-only adapter. You should only have one. If you have two, make sure you select the correct one. Whichever one you select here, you must select for all your other virtual machines. Because again, we want them to be able to talk to each other. When we start installing the K-optics servers, they all need to be on the same host-only network. Advanced, go into promiscuous mode and allow all. Again, adapter 1 is fine. Adapter 2 we enable. Make sure we specify the host-only adapter. Once we've done that, we click on advanced so we can go into promiscuous mode and select allow all. Alright, and then that should be it. Those are the two biggies, the network and the storage. Making sure you have a second network adapter specified, and in storage, ensuring that you have specified your Kali installation CD. The other options, giving yourself more video memory and giving yourself a second processor core, those are nice to haves. Any questions? At this point, you can start your VM and start your Kali install. Please go ahead and do so now. When you do that, sometimes you will see this message. And this really does depend on the version of VirtualBox you have installed. Just if it says, hey, which one do you want to use, just make sure you select from the drop-down list the correct ISO and then click on Start. You should then see something like this. Now the mouse won't work, so we actually have to hit the Enter key. So click inside and hit Enter so that it will start up your virtual machine. And at this point, it's very much like the Debian install all over again. You want to select a language. As I've said before, it's unfortunate, but many developers don't do language packs properly, so it's often better to install in English just to mitigate against a poorly designed, poorly released bit of code that doesn't do languages properly. So click on English and continue. We want to specify Canada, so hit C and your keyboard and it'll take you to the C's. The only one is Canada. Click on Continue. The American English keyboard should be fine. Click on Continue. It will go through, it'll find the CD-ROM, and it'll start pulling data off of it. And you can always tell what's going on by looking at the status bar right here. It shows CD, or in this case DVD reads, and it'll also show hard drive activity, and once we have it set up, it will show network activity as well. When we set up our virtual machine hardware, we gave ourselves two network adapters. One that uses NAT and one that uses the host only. All right? It's interesting. Anyway, we have to, again, and I'll be saying this a lot, you must understand your environment. Adapter 1, the one that is NAT, is the one we want to use to talk to the internet, and that is the primary network interface during the installation. So it can go out and download the necessary components from the offensive security repositories online of software if necessary. So select the appropriate adapter. ENP0S3 is adapter 1, ENP0S8 is adapter 2. For me, adapter 2 is NAT, or is a host only. Adapter 1 is NAT. Adapter 1 is the adapter I'm going to select. It should auto-config. It should grab an IP address, and if you're using VirtualBox, the IP address will be 10.0.2.15. Seems to be pretty standard for NAT adapters in VirtualBox. Now it wants to give us a host name. The default is fine. Most of the activities we're going to do in this class are going to use the command line. So because I'm going to spend a lot of time in the terminal window in the command line, I like having a nice short username and a nice short host name. So I usually use my username as SJAY, which is 4 characters obviously, and a host name of Cali, which is also 4 characters. Everything is nice and short. It gives me more space to type in commands and arguments for those commands. So host name is fine. Click on continue. We don't need to specify a domain. I always specify opsys.bit, but we reference everything by IP address, so we don't have to worry about any of the naming that we do. You could just as easily leave that blank. A full name for a new user, I'm going to just specify the user ID I want, because that's what gets copied forward. So I typed in SJSJ, and then it wants a password, and please understand how you have this set up. This is a test bed inside of a closed environment inside of your laptop. Doesn't matter if you use a real bad password. It's actually better to keep it simple and easy. I know it's a dangerous habit to get into, but nevertheless, this is closed inside of your laptop, inside a VirtualBox, and you're not going to be storing personal information on it. I wouldn't worry about password discipline too much. Get the right time zone, C for Central, and then it'll go through and start setting up the components necessary for enabling or creating partitions on your hard drive. Are there any questions? Is anybody not at this point who's playing along? Let's move on. Normally, you can go into some of the nuances when you're setting up a production environment system for Linux, especially if you're setting up a server that you're going to allow users to use. We don't have that concern here. We're just going to set up a virtual machine. We're going to use it as we saw when we were looking at writing reports earlier this week. It is quite possible that we're going to use it for one attack, blow it away, and set up another one in a couple of months. So really the nuances about creating separate partitions for different types of storage of data on a Linux box, it's out of scope for our concerns. So the defaults are fine. Continue, 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 continue. And it's on this last one where it says write changes to the disk. It's on this slide here that we actually have to say yes. Up to this point, it hasn't made any changes to the hard drive, but right now, as far as the installer is concerned, it's going to change an existing hard drive. It's not a hard drive, it's a file representing a hard drive in our computer, and the installer kind of knows that, but it doesn't really matter right now. As far as it's concerned, it's changing a hard drive, and it's saying, are you sure you want to do this? Because this is going to damage anything that's on the hard drive already. It's not in place, so we can definitely say yes and click on continue. It will then go through, and you can see again in your status bar, the hard drive is writing, the CD-ROM is, or in this case DVD, the optical media is reading. We can also see how much CPU resources are being consumed as well. Are there any questions? Takes a minute, we're just going to let it run. Once it has that done, it's going to allow us to select and install software. And this is a relatively new feature as well. Up until this point, Kali just installed everything. Also, up until this point, when you installed Kali, you ran everything as root. You didn't have any of this nuanced stuff where you created a user, you logged in as that user, and if you need to do root level activities, you use sudo or something like that. Up until this point, everything was done as root and everything was installed. I think they've changed the way that they're doing it. I'm not sure why. I don't know if they were pressured by the Ubuntu group to change the way that they're doing stuff, or they're just hoping people will use Kali as their daily drivers in Linux. And I hope that's not what they're doing, because Kali should not be anybody's daily driver, full stop. Regardless of why they're doing it, we now specify what we want to install. I'm going to say to select large, we want to install everything, and we want to use XFCE. You can look at GNOME and KDE, but I wouldn't. Anytime I have students set up, and personally when I set up for myself by and large, if I'm setting up a virtual environment using Ubuntu, I use XFCE. It's a fast desktop environment. It doesn't have a lot of the bloat that GNOME and KDE have. It just runs so much faster. Also, you want to make sure you have these tools selected as well. The top 10, the default, and large. So everything gets installed, and your Windows Manager is XFCE. GNOME and KDE should be cleared. Everything else should be checked. Click on Continue. And if you don't do that and something's missing, you can usually install it, because Ubuntu is Debian-like or Debian-based in that it uses package management with online repositories. Okay, can you share your desktop with me, James? Because this is going to take a while. You can see it's doing a lot of reads here, and then it's going to do a lot of writes to the hard drive. So James is indicating he's having problems. Go ahead and share your desktop, James.
I keep getting this error message. I tried.
Click on details, please. Don't close. No. Oh,
sorry.
Now start it again. All right. Click on details. And what does it say? Okay. Click on OK. Click on File, and under File, click on Host Only, Host Network Manager. Click on DHCP. Okay. Click on Close. Click on Adapter 2. Now click on Networks for your settings. Yeah. Click on Advanced. Click on the Host Only Adapter. Click on the one below it, the name. Yeah. Click on OK. You're going to have to restart your laptop, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It doesn't like your host network, and the only way to fix that is to restart Windows. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I hate giving that as an answer because it's such a tech support cop-out, but more often than not, that fixes problems with VirtualBox.
Okay.
All right?
I was having a similar issue, and I found all you had to do is remake the host-only adapter.
Recreate it?
Yeah, just recreate it, because you had all the right information. I was having the same thing. All you have to do is delete it and then recreate it.
You can try that.
Reboot.
Yeah, you can try that, James, if you want. But it might break your existing one. If you already have one in place for Debian, what's that going to do to your Debian one, right? So,
That's true.
yeah, so what I tell students is I just have them restart it, and then it works better. So that's what I'm going to recommend.
Okay. I'll do that.
All right.
Thanks, dude.
Thank you. And thank you whoever contributed the remake suggestion. It's always good for knowing what other people are doing to know what works and what doesn't work. So I appreciate the suggestion. I missed who said it though, unfortunately. Okay, so this is going to take a little while. While this is running, we'll let it run. I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so after your installation has run for a while, you're going to see the grub loader. Now, remind me, please, ladies and gentlemen, what are the 3 components necessary to boot an operating system in the PC world? Anybody?
The kernel,
Yep.
BIOS,
BIOS, and what's the third thing?
bootloader.
Bootloader, exactly. All three components are necessary even when we're setting up Linux in a virtualized environment. We have a BIOS as part of the virtual machine virtual hardware. We also have just installed an operating system, which is the kernel. Now what we need to install is a bootloader. Ensure yes is selected and click on continue. The default should be fine, but again, on this screen, you have to tell it where you want to install your bootloader, because again, the Kali installer is saying it's an Ubuntu installer modified for Kali, but it's saying, hey, I'm about to change the boot sector or the boot partition of this hard drive. Are you sure you want to make a change to this physical device? So we have to expressly say, write it to that device, select dev SDA, and click on continue. And it should install grub, and it should go through and finish the installation. There's a little bit of cleanup that has to happen, and we're going to set that off to the side, and we're going to let that run. Next thing we want to look at, and if you are a little behind or whatever, say yes to grub, and then select dev SDA. Select the second option, click on continue, and let it do its thing. Now we are going to import Metasploitable. Hopefully you've downloaded the correct one that has the right usernames in it. I apologize for the confusion, that's on me. But this is what we do. Back in VirtualBox, we go File, and under File we go Import Appliance. This is a wizard that allows us to import a virtual machine standard format that allows you to share virtual machines to different environments. It's important to understand this because we spend a lot of time using this import tool to bring machines into VirtualBox so we can attack them, so we can analyze them and find vulnerabilities. Okay? Select the little folder icon, navigate to where you have your downloads, and select the latest Metasploitable that you should have downloaded today. Click on Open and click on Next. You should also notice that the installation is probably complete in Kali. You can click on Continue in the background. Now we could change these settings at this point, but it's not as nice as using the management tool inside of VirtualBox to change these. So we're going to leave these as is and click on Import. And when we do that, again, depending on the hard drive subsystem you have, this can be very quick or it can be a little long, but it's a fairly quick process to import Metasploitable. Okay? Once it's in, before we start it, we have to verify some settings. So just like we did when we were setting up Kali, now that it's set up, we go into our settings and verify. First, it's a server. 1 gig is lots. For a server, we don't need more. The number of processor cores at 1, that's fine. We don't need more than that. The display, it's a command line server. It's an old instance of some Linux running in the command line. 16 meg for a display is lots. Storage, it's got the disk. That's all we need. We don't need a CD-ROM. Note the controller is IDE and not SATA. We could probably remove that SATA controller, but we're not going to. We'll see if it's giving us problems. If there is a problem going forward that it can't find a driver and it's throwing errors, remove the controller that's not being used. Audio, we should probably disable that, but again, it doesn't matter. Network, again, this is where you have to verify your setup. We only need one adapter for our target machine, and it needs to be on the host-only network. I had configured this to do that, okay? I configured this to use the host-only adapter, and you should ensure that it uses the correct host-only network name that you have set up in your environment. You should only have one, it should only find one, but click on the drop down and make sure. Promiscuous mode should be allow all, but we always want to make sure that that gets set. Anytime we import a VM, we want to check the settings, but we really want to focus on the network. Is the network using the host-only network? Is it using the correctly called one? And has promiscuous mode been set to allow all? Those are settings. I want you to verify everything, but certainly verify those 3 settings every time you bring in a target machine to attack in this environment. Once you've done that, you can then click on OK, and then you can start up your Metasploitable VM. Please go ahead and do so now, and it will look something like this. As you watch it boot, you will note that there are a lot of services that it is firing up. A lot. It has Postgres, it has MySQL, it has SSH, it has a couple of FTP servers, it has an IRC daemon running. It has Jakarta running. It has a web server like port 80 running. It just has a lot of stuff. Okay? And right away we see, never expose this VM to an untrusted network. So again, we should keep it closed on our host-only network, and you never see this. This is the only time you will see this. You can log in with msfadmin, msfadmin to get started. Is everybody at this point? Are there any questions? Nope to the questions, or nope you're at this point, Chris?
Nope, I'm not at this point. I'm still downloading Metasploitable.
Okay.
My internet's kind of crap out morning.
Okay.
Yeah, same.
Same? Okay.
Uh-huh.
Well, I'm recording this. I really want to keep moving, so I'll let you guys look at the video later and just follow along. There are 2 documents in Learn that we want to take a look at today. One is Metasploiting Metasploitable. Where is it? There it is. Metasploiting Metasploitable. This talks about in detail how you attack a number of various machines. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, and that's fine. I will tell you right now, until we fix Samba, the Samba attacks will not work. All right? I'll just spend a moment on this. Samba has been notoriously weak for a very long time. It's been a known vulnerability, so much so that in the latest specification from the SMB group, they said your driver should not be backwards compatible with SMB1 and SMB2. They've turned off backwards compatibility with SMB, which is rare, very, very rare in the Microsoft PC world. That has been a driving force with Microsoft since DOS 1. They've always tried to maintain backwards compatibility. So this was a pretty big move for them to say, no, we're not maintaining backwards compatibility. Long story short, these attacks, these SMB attacks, are not going to work. I'm going to go through and do the network scan and do an initial attack, but I'm going to focus on VSFTP initially. Okay, you can try Unreal. It didn't work with the other group, and I haven't figured out why. But again, we're going to just focus on both this document and pen testing activities 2, which we've already started looking at. Okay, so that's what we're going to do for the remainder of today. First things first. You can log in to Metasploitable as MSFadmin, and the password is MSFadmin. Okay, and you can verify your network settings. IP adder will tell you that ETH0 is using 192.168.56.199. As you can see, I use VirtualBox a lot. That is the 99th virtual machine I have set up in this environment. I use this tool a lot. Okay, now that I know that, I can log into my Kali, my username and my password that I specified during my installation. There we go. Alrighty, I can bring up a terminal, and I really should. And verify the IP address here in Kali. Uh-oh, problemo. ETH1 has grabbed the IP address on the host-only network. That's good. That's what it should do. But ETH0 doesn't have an IPv4 address. It doesn't have an IPv6 address either, obviously. It's got a MAC address, but that's it. So ETH0 is not connecting, and that's a problem for me. The reason is because we've only defined one network adapter in Kali. So one of the first things you want to do, verify your network is up and running, understand what is working. In this case, ETH1 is working. ETH0 needs a new adapter. In the upper right corner, there's a little icon that looks like a network port. When you select it, it shows the network information, but if you right click, use the alternative mouse button, you can edit these connections. And you can see there's only one connection, so you need to click on the plus to add a separate connection. Again, how did I do this? Right click on the network port, select edit connections, click on the plus, and Ethernet is fine. The defaults are usually fine. The only thing you have to specify the device. We know ETH1 is fine, so we select ETH0, verify it's using DHCP, click on save, and you can close this and test your network again. And there it is. My NAT is using 10.0.2.15. That's the standard NAT interface that we see in VirtualBox. ETH1 still has an IP address on my shut off this phone. Okay, sorry about that. This has an IP address on my host-only network, and again, as I say here in this document, wrong one. You must understand your environment, all right? You must understand this. You must understand the IP addresses. This is nice to know as well. You've got your laptop or whatever running with Windows 10 probably running, or maybe it's Mac OS running on an iMac. Inside of that, you have VirtualBox and a series of guest operating systems. That's the physical how it lays out. This is how it lays out conceptually, especially with regard to the network. You must understand your environment. Normally, we don't get to know, and I'm sorry I can't zoom in. This is actually a terminal through a VirtualBox, and I really can't zoom in. I don't think I can. No, I don't think I can. Anyway, I have the IP address here, but normally we don't have that. And that's what I'm showing you in Metasploiting Metasploitable pages 1 and 2. We need to scan our network and discover that machine. We do that with the nmap command. I know my network is 192.168.56. I want to scan the entirety of the network, so I do .0/24. It's going to scan everything on the network, and it's going to report back. Historically, it also reported the gateway, and it also reported the DHCP server. Also, it tended to report itself last. Okay? So we know that we are 192.168.56.198. Why is that gone? Why does that always disappear? Well, because I typed in clear, that's why. I know that this is the IP address of my Kali. If I want to verify, here it is right here, 192.168.56.198. 56.198, that's Kali. I don't want to focus on that. Here's another one that has a bunch of services on it. Let's target that. Coincidentally, it should match the IP address that we identified in Metasploitable, but we don't always have that luxury, so we do a network scan. And now that we've seen there are all of these services, and there are a lot, let's do some specific recon on that machine. The Nmap tool is actually not a hacking tool. The Nmap tool is exactly as the name implies. It maps out network resources, and it'll let you take a look at services as well. Problem is that it can be used by hackers to map out a network and find out exactly what the services are. And there are some pretty cool switches, and we're only going to scratch the surface on Nmap. If you want to talk to Kiki in the other section. She is an Nmap, she's a big fan of Nmap. So if you want to learn about some of the positive things you can do with it, talk to Kiki. But Nmap -S to list the services, and then uppercase V to get the version information as well. So we're going to try and get as much information as we can about the services, and you'll see why in a sec. You also want as much information as possible about the operating system. So we do an uppercase O. That's not a 0, it's an uppercase O. So Nmap space dash lower s upper V space dash upper O space. And then we want to scan all ports dash P1 dash 65535. So I'm going to scan all ports except 0 on this machine. All 65,536 ports except 0. Okay? So check everything running on this machine. And then we need to specify a host IP. And this is where the terminal is really nice. This is my target machine here. I double click and I use the middle mouse button. It's a wheel, but it also allows it to be depressed. It will paste it for us. And we can see it right there. If the paste doesn't work, double click, right, copy, right, paste selection, and it'll paste it at that point. All right? And right away, same thing happened with the other group. Right away, this is something that I dislike about the new Kali. I'm using this for attacking, and every time I need to type in, oh yeah, sudo, and then retype my command. Or as, again, Kiki in the other class pointed out, I can do double exclamation mark, or what's called double bang. Do the last command, but this time do it with the sudo, and hit enter. And it wants my password. Supply the password that you used when you logged in. Now let's talk about this. The sudo command, you've probably seen it before, stands for substitute user, switch user, or super user do, depending on who you talk to. I believe it originally stood for substitute user and then do something. Substitute user do. If you don't specify a user, it assumes that you want to become the root user. There's a lot of configuration necessary, but a lot of systems come that when you just log in as a regular user, a lot of systems give you the ability to become root as necessary, especially if that regular user you create is the first user. The first user we created in Kali was, for me, my SJ account. It's added me to the sudoers file, it's given me root permissions, and then I can just go ahead and do everything. It asks for a password. You can actually even configure it to not ask for a password. And that's probably how I would do it. But more likely than not, I'm going to go in to the sudo command, and I'm going to set a password for root, and I'm going to log in as root in the future, because I dislike logging in and using the sudo command on a system that I'm going to do everything as root probably anyway. The double bang is basically execute the last command, and we do that with the sudo command. Nice trick to redo what we did before. If there, you see how it has flashes of red? That's telling us that it's still trying to do something. So that's a good indicator that it hasn't completely hung up. But when you scan almost all of the 65,536 ports that a server has, it does take some time. We're going to let it run its time and see. If you don't specify a port range, it does what I think it does the first 10,000 ports rather than all 65,000. Okay? You can specify a range if you really want to target specific services. But after a little while, you should see something like this. And this is great, great, great intel. All right? It says 65,505 of the ports are closed. That's fine. It says FTP is running, and it tells me exactly not only the software, but the version of the software. Telnet is running. It's just standard Linux Telnet. That's fine. Open SSH and the version, right? Samba version here. That is problematic. MySQL 505 is being very, very specific. And because we specified a range, it did everything above 10,000 as well. Also, it gave us as much information as it could about the operating system. It's some kind of Linux. It's running kernel 2.6. We're not sure exactly what it is. We think it's one of these Linuxes. And here's some network names for it as well. But that doesn't matter because we don't use names. We use IP info. Are there any questions? Did everybody get that? Okay, let's move on. One of the first things it returned is this VSFTP daemon. The reason why we set up NAT and host only for Kali is so we can do some research. Under the start menu, it's not start, but under the start menu, there is a web browser. When you select that, it launches Firefox. Okay? It used to be called Iceweasel, now it's called Firefox. Also, when you click on the start menu, take a look at all the software that gets installed. Information gathering, analysis, web analysis, database analysis, exploitation tools, reporting tools, forensics tools. When we were talking about reporting, we talked about Faraday and Gradus. Both of those appear to be set up by default in this version of Kali. Not everything appears in every version. Sometimes you have to go and find your own things, but there's a lot of tools available in this distribution. Right now we want Firefox, and we want to Google VSFTP 234 and see if there's any vulnerabilities with it. So I'm going to go to Google. Because I have NAT enabled, it finds the Google website, no problems. And I want to research VSFTP D 2.3, and right away 2.3.4 exploit exists. When I click on that, one of the first sites it gives me is the backdoor execution from Rapid7. I would take a look at this right away because Rapid7 is the developer. You pain in the ass. You pain in the ass. The joys of doing classes in live real time. Alright, well, let's take a look at this one. I really wanted to show you the Rapid7 site because it showed us how to realize the exploit. I really wanted to show you that. Okay, I apologize. I'll try and shoehorn this into the presentation later. The Rapid7 site is down. It's too bad because they're the ones who did the tool we're going to use going forward. And I always like referencing back to this because if you find a vulnerability on the Rapid7, you can usually find how to exploit it. Now, it doesn't always work, and modern systems should not have this, but it's a nice, cool little feature if you can take advantage of it. If we were to take a look at that site, the information would be very similar to the information I have here in this document. It would say, use this exploit, show the options, set any options that are not in place, and then run the exploit. Again, you must understand your environment. The IP address I have in the notes is the IP address of the target machine, in this case 101. Obviously, that's not going to work here. Okay? Now, another thing, I like opening up separate tabs for new activities. This is my network scan, this is my network information, Control-Shift-T to open up a new tab, and I am going to start my MSF console. MSF console, like that. And it will start up a framework that allows you to leverage exploits defined by Rapid7. It's a great tool. It's been around for a while. It's a really, really cool thing to take advantage of. And it has ASCII art when it starts up. Don't be freaked out by the ASCII art, okay? Also, if you see something like a seg fault or a page file error or something like that, it's ASCII art. It's not really crashing on you. It's just, okay, Mitchell, what I'll get you to do is I'll get you to follow along in the video later, okay? But it's pretty straightforward. Once you've scanned your network and discovered a vulnerability, once you research that vulnerability, you can then run an exploit against that vulnerability. In this case, it's going to be using the Metasploit framework. And what we do is we say exploit tab, ex tab, UN, it's a Unix exploit for FTP, and it was the VS FTP daemon 234 backdoor. It matches the service name. They often do. Okay? We hit enter, and the payload's fine, don't worry about that. Show options. Anytime you specify an exploit or a payload to use, you need to set some options, or at least verify that the options are already set properly. There are two options that we can set. There's also a payload, but we're not going to mess with payloads. We don't talk about payloads for a couple of weeks. But we do want to get these options set. Both are required. We need a remote port and we need a remote host or hosts names. If I check, the port is 21, so the existing setting for the remote port is okay. I need to set the remote host. So we set our hosts, and I always keep it in the same case. I'm probably being unnecessary, but and then I have to specify the IP address that I had, 192.168.56, and for me it was 199. That was the IP address of the machine I was targeting. So I need to set that, verify again. That's set, and then you can type in exploit, just like that. Okay, and this is what you want to see. Command shell session opened. It also says the user is root and the group ID is root. What this is saying is that it has logged me in as root. We always verify. With the whoami command, it actually says you are root. Cool. We logged in as root. So, pwd, you're in the root of the file system. I can do an ls. I can cat etc password. No problem. Can I cat etc shadow? Oh look, tab doesn't work. And that's something to keep in mind. In a lot of cases, you're not using the best shells. You're using whatever is available. You can augment it, and we'll see that in a couple of classes, but right now, you're kind of stuck with the shell that you have, and tricks that work in bash don't always work here. But again, I was able to see the passwords file, and this is the shadow file with the password hashes for the different users. Awesome. Okay? Now, I can steal those credentials, and it's pretty straightforward. And this is the trick that I use. I go for the etc password, and I select everything from root right down to the last user ID in the list, which should be Stan. So I go everything from root right down to Stan, edit, copy, go to your start menu, select a text editor. The text editor is that's better. Make it a little easier, and then paste the discovered usernames. Save this, and we want to save it somewhere. And I really want you to get into the habit of creating a directory structure. Okay? I'm not just going to put it in my home directory. I'm going to create a directory. They're calling it a folder, and I'm going to call it Metasploitable. And then in Metasploitable, I'm going to save this. I'm going to call it msf_users.txt. Perfect. I'm going to go back to my exploit, and I'm going to grab the passwords. Again, double click and hide everything down to the end of Stan. So you can grab Stan's password as well. Edit, copy, go back to your text editor. Where's my text editor? Control N and paste it there. And now I've got my passwords. File, save as. Again, go to Metasploitable, and I'm going to call this msf_pass.txt. Extension doesn't matter. Now that I've stolen the usernames and passwords, I can go back to my terminal, another tab, I'm going to zoom in, cd Metasploitable, there are my two files, and now I can unshadow msf_users, msf_passwords, and it's going to throw an error, but that's okay. And just like we did when we were doing password audits, we're going to redirect this to msf_user_pass.txt. Okay? And it's going to complain. The reason is because I need to do it as root. So sudo bang bang, and it wants my password again. And now I've got my MSF user pass. I verify, and that looks right. It has the username, it has the password hash, it has the user ID, group ID, home directory, and default shell. That's the proper syntax, so we can now run John the Ripper. And it's simply John and then MSF user pass.text. Oh, it didn't like that. Sudo bang bang, and right away it finds Kyle is football, Cartman is password, Kenny is QWERTY, Stan is Superman. It also found the sys ID, which is a system ID, has a password, as well as klog has a password. It found all the passwords. Now, if you don't have Kyle, Cartman, Kenny, and Stan in your list, it's because you're using the wrong Metasploitable, and that's fine. You don't have to use the right one, because even the other one has klog and sys. That's fine. Are there any questions? We're going to do 2 more activities if everybody's okay with that. Can we just plow through without taking a break? All right. Let's keep going forward then. The next thing we are going to do is, this is nice, this is really cool, but the only reason it worked is because our service scan found this vulnerable service running, and we were able to exploit it in the MSF console. We don't always have that luxury, and frankly, the focus of this is web security. And normally you don't have a terminal access to these websites. All you have is browser access. So let's look at that. We know what our IP address is, 192.168.56.199. Okay? When we go to that website, we start looking for information. Let's take a look at DVWA, because we've seen it before and we know it's vulnerable. When you log in to DVWA, it is your admin and password. Again, how did I get here? I went back to my browser, opened a new tab, and I went to the IP address of my Metasploitable. Metasploitable, not Kali. I went to the IP address of Metasploitable, and it showed DVWA. I clicked on it, and it gave me the login page. My username is admin, and the password is password. Unless you change it, it is always that. Okay? First things, we verify the security level. The security level is high. We want to set that to low for today's class. So select DVWA security and set the security level to low. Click on submit. Again, how did I get that? Once I was logged in, I scrolled down to the bottom, verified username, verified security level, and saw that it was high. I selected the DVWA security link, and in the drop-down list, I set it to low and select submit. And at that point, it let me set the security level to low, and we can verify it here. Okay? Now, it'll be a lot easier for us to do some attacks. The first one we're going to look at is command execution, and we've seen this already. We've already seen command execution. What it does is a ping command, and I can ping 192.168.56.199. I'm going to ping itself and see what it says. And it works. I can ping localhost. And it works. Now, can I do a command injection? And I can. There are the files right there. So we know command injections work. Perfect. But I don't need to see this going forward. Alright? I don't want to see this. So rather than giving it an IP address, like localhost, I'm just going to end one command and start another one, just like that. And the ping fails, it doesn't return anything, and it moves right on to the second command, the ls command. This is handy. Now, can I take a look at password file? Awesome! It shows me the contents of the password file, including Cartman, Kenny, Kyle, and Stan. Could I actually maybe see the contents of the shadow file? No, of course not, because only root can see that. If I want to know who I am, I do a command injection, who am I? And it tells me who I am running as, and in this case, who I'm running as is www.data, which is pretty typical on Apache-based web servers. You usually run as, it used to be HT user or something like that. But it's most often these days www-data is the user ID that the Apache and Apache 2 service runs as. So if you're looking for processes running for Apache, it's usually under that user ID. And if your server is set up properly, you should have very few permissions for that user into the system. You shouldn't have to give that user ID access to anything other than web services, which is the whole point. Okay? But that doesn't matter. I was able to take a look at the contents of the password file, and it gave me this, including these IDs, Cartman, Kenny, Kyle, and Stan. Perfect. What I am going to do is I'm going to go back to my text editor, open up a new tab, and I'm going to copy those users into it. Cartman, Kenny, Kyle, and Stan. I want to attack these 4 users. If you've only got what was it? Klog and sys. If you don't have the other 4, that's fine. Target those 2. It will still work. Okay? But now that I've got those 4, I can save that. Again, I want to save it in Metasploitable, and I'm going to call this DVWA_users.txt. just like that. Okay? Any questions on that? Does that make sense? How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good? People are still able to follow along?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. I'm going to assume Chung's speaking for everyone. So let's open up another tab again because I want to focus on cracking these passwords. In Kali, there are a couple of network password cracking tools that are available to us. One of them is Medusa. Medusa is a really nice password cracking tool for trying to crack different services. Specifically, services like SSH. We know SSH is running on the Metasploitable server, on our target environment. We can use Medusa to target it. And by the way, I am on Pentest Activities 2. If you're following along, I am on page, I don't even know what page I'm on, sorry. I get excited and I forget to follow my notes. Okay, I am on page 7 of that handout. Okay, and we're going to use, oh no, I'm past that, we've already done that. We've done that, we've done that. We are on page 12 of the handout and getting on to the bottom of page 12 and the top of page 13. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to use the Medusa command. If it's not installed, you need to install it. But in this version of Kali, it is installed. One thing that's missing, however, is the ROCU password. So I want you to do the following: ls-al/USR/sh tab for share, WO tab for word lists, and then, well, we can hit enter on that. This is a collection of either word lists or locations of word lists that you can use in your attacks in Kali. One of the word lists that we are going to look at is the ROCU word list. This word list is from the ROCU website from many years ago. They had this photo sharing website back in the day, and it had something like 14.5 million unique passwords in it. And they was stored in plain text, because that's what people did back then. Unless they had to do something, they didn't do it, and people were not aware of SQL injections like they are now. Of course, somebody hacked the website. Of course, somebody did an SQL injection and stole the username passwords from the ROCU website. And then they brought it in and they sorted by the number of the popularity of the password and gave unique results, giving us the ROCU word list. And as we were talking about with password cracking a while ago, you can use a dictionary to verify a password is not common. This is one of the better dictionaries out there. This is 14.5 million unique passwords from a real website from a few years ago. It's a great dictionary for auditing. It's also a great dictionary for password cracking as well. We are going to use this, but it is compressed. That's what the .gz means. It's a compressed file. So what we need to do is uncompress this, and it's gun-zip zip. Gunzip, or most people just say gunzip. We're going to gunzip the ROCU file. You need to fully qualify the path /USR/sh tab, WO tab, RO tab, and it auto completes everything for us. And that's it. If there's extra features in the zip file, then you need to take that into account, but they didn't in this case. They simply compressed it to save space. Oh, again, we don't have permissions, but that's fine. Sudo bang bang password is password, and then if we do an ls-al of the word list directory, it goes from being a compressed gzip file to an uncompressed text file. Okay? And this uncompressed text file is almost 140 megabytes in size. But what's more importantly, you can use the wc command. the word count. -L will do a line count. Each password is in a separate line, and that's fine. And then again, USR share word RO tab, and it will do a count of the number of unique lines in this rocku.txt file. And as we can see, it is 14.3 million unique lines, 14.3 unique passwords from a real website from a few years ago. We can use this as a dictionary for our attacks. Any questions on that? Okay, before we use it, we often have to uncompress it, because in every calorie that I've seen, it comes distributed as being compressed ahead of time. It's quite a size difference between the two. It goes from 53 megabytes to 140 megabytes, which is really, quite a bit of a difference. Any questions? Okay, now that I've got my word list in place, now I can try cracking those users. CD Metasploitable ls. Here are my DVWA users, and I can use the Medusa command. Medusa -U. I want to specify users. All right, DV perfect. -P because I want to specify a password. Highlight and paste, or simply type it in. That's always good as well. /USR/SH tab WO tab RO tab. Perfect. -M is the service we're going to attack, and as we saw, the service we are interested in is SSH. We could, in theory, also attack SMB, but as I said, SMB isn't working properly, so we're not going to. We're going to focus on SSH. -H, lowercase h, is for the host, and that's the IP address of Metasploitable. 192.168.56, for me, 199. And then I'm going to output uppercase O to success.txt, just like that. And I'm going to hit enter. And as it iterates through each user ID in this file, each of these 4 users, it's going to try the password. Right away, it found the password for Cartman was password. Now it's going to try and find Kenny's, and then Kyle's, and then Stan's. We did not have access to a password list. We had user IDs, and we were able to use that and a weak system, in this case a poorly configured SSH session, to start cracking passwords. I don't know if you remember when I was talking about this before, and I told you that passwords or authentication, and there we just got QWERTY for Kenny. I mentioned at the time that there are 2 important parts to validating you are who you say you are on a network resource: your username and your password. I told you that the username was the easy bit, but it was still important, and that's why you should never have the username the same as an email address. Now you know why. Even with just the username, because the security isn't in place properly, but even if it was, even if it allowed only 3 failed attempts in 15 minutes, then I slowed down the rate at which I tried cracking these passwords until I get lucky. And I'll show you something. The passwords that I set for these 4 users are at the very top of the RawCube passwords. They're some of the most common passwords that they found on this website. And I did that on purpose. But imagine if Cartman's password was not in that dictionary. Imagine if Cartman's password, you went through all 14.5 million records and we didn't find a password for Cartman. The entire process would be hung up until that worked. So another way of doing this, rather than doing all the users individually, what I like to do is the following. I will attack each individual user. Rather than doing uppercase U and the users list, what I will do is lowercase u and then Cartman. I will attack each individual user. I'll still use the dictionary. I'll still use the IP address of the host machine guest machine I'm attacking, and I will still, well, that doesn't help me. I can get rid of that part because, frankly, at the end there, I don't know if it appends or it overwrites. I can't remember if it appends or overwrites. I'm afraid it overwrites, so I'm just going to do it like this and not worry about it. Okay? Or I could output to success_Cartman.txt. Also good. Okay? But I'm going to attack these 4 individually. First, and highlight everything before you hit enter. Highlight everything so it's in your buffer. Hit enter and then Control-Shift-T to open up a new tab. Paste. Change Cartman to Kenny and the user ID from Cartman. And try that attack. Right away it works. Control-Shift-T. Zoom in a little bit. We're now going to do Kyle. And then another tab, zoom in, and the final one is going to be Stan. So I can go through and attack each individual user that way, because I know I set this up so it would flow nicely. But in the real world, I wouldn't know if my users' passwords are in that dictionary. In a real case scenario, I'm doing a password audit and none of them should be in that dictionary, but you never know. So rather than doing one file, oh yeah, I didn't go into my Metasploitable directory, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. It's just going to create the directories in different places. So, Cartman's password was password perfect. Kenny's password was QWERTY perfect. Stan's password will show up in a little bit, and then finally Kyle's will show up as well. But they can run concurrently, and then you're not having any single one of them fail the entire process. Okay? And we did this. I should also apologize to everybody in the class. I don't sanitize. Yeah, there it is. So Kyle's password was football, perfect, but we can see in the list just above football one password that was more popular is somebody using the F-bomb. And I don't give you a sanitized version of the password lists. These are the real tools that you are going to use, and I apologize. This is the nature of the kind of stuff you see online. Believe me, that is by no means the worst thing that you're going to find in that dictionary of passwords. I apologize, but you need the real world tools, and that includes the real world dictionaries or word files that people use in the wild, because that's what you're going to use when it comes time for you. If I sanitize this and one of the passwords in one of our systems was that dirty word, then you can't compromise that system. We have to use the real tools as they present to us. Okay? And eventually Stan's password will be realized as well, and Stan is Superman. Any questions? So again, this was a multifaceted attack. We went through the browser, we did command injection, we were able to get the usernames of the system, we were then able to take that, and knowing that this site is running SSH, I was able to use SSH and those user IDs to crack those passwords. Are there any questions? Okay. The last thing I want to show you is an SQL injection. We've already seen this a little bit, but again, it's pretty cool what you can do with DVWA. And frankly, we're going to use Kali again. I'm going to open up another tab. I'm going to zoom in, and you don't need to zoom in. I zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to CD into Metasploitable this time. I forgot to a number of other times, but that's fine. Another thing we're going to look at in DVWA is SQL injections. And I am now in the Word document. I am on page, no, I don't need this anymore. I need this one. We've done that. I explain everything that we've done. I am on the bottom of page 14 of the handout now, where we're going to start taking a look at SQL injections. Now, it says, let's take a look at the user ID. As always, the first thing we do is view the page source. There's really nothing here. That's the form right there. I mean, we could search this page. We're not going to find any real clues at all. So let's just submit an empty form. Let's just throw something in there. Let's just throw a number in there. Oh, a number works. Awesome. What else works? 2 works. 3, 4, 5, and 6 doesn't work. Okay? So we know that this is looking for some numbers. Let's see if we can't try and figure this out. Or 1 is equal to 1, and we'll try the standard dash dash for a comment and see if it works. Please pay attention. Sorry, before I go any further, let me do this. So my injection so far is 1 is equal to 1, and then we're going to try the dash dash, okay? Because when we did our service scan, we saw both Postgres and MySQL were running. The more common commenting is the dash dash. Let's try it. And right away, we have a problem. You have an error in your SQL syntax. Check the manual that corresponds to your MySQL server version. Right away, we're bleeding information. All right? We are bleeding information. I'm telling hackers that this is running MySQL. Unacceptable. All right? But now I can modify my injection from dash dash to hash. And right away we can see that injections work. Another injection is %tick, or 1 is equal to 1, and then again the hash, which also seems to work. So right away we know tick or 1 equals to 1, and the hash, that one works. So we can do SQL injections based on that. Okay? Any questions? Does that make sense? Now, one of the more common things that attackers will do once they gain access to a system through SQL injections is try and... Why is that showing? I don't want that to show. Go away. I don't know why that's showing, but apologies, but I can't seem to clear that. If I do this, will go away. Sorry, I can't get rid of that. I apologize. Oh, there it's gone now. Okay, so one of the things that hackers want to do once they realize that a site is open to SQL injections is they want to try and pull other data rather than the data that's being presented in this form, in this area. To do that, what they'll often do is a union statement, where they'll take an existing query and they'll add a second result set to it using the SQL union clause. And that's what we're going to do here. We know that tick or 1 is equal to 1 works. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and union it with a second select statement. But to do that, we have to know how many columns There are here. Now we can make a guess. The ID doesn't return an ID number. The ID actually returns the previous injection. What gets returned are 2 columns. Now we can guess that the result set is 2 columns, but we should really make sure before we try doing anything else. So what we're going to do is we're going to modify our injection to determine the number of columns. And we can do that with the order by clause. And I don't know if you remember from SQL1 or SQL2, there's 3 different ways of sorting a query. You can sort by the column name. We don't have column names. If it's a calculated column, you can sort by the formula used for that calculated column. We don't know what that is here. And the third option is by the column number in the columns specified in the select statement. If I say order by 3, it will try and sort by the 3rd column. So let's try that injection. And when I do that, it says unknown column 3. So there is no 3rd column. Perfect. Let's try, instead of by 3, let's try by 2 then. And it sorts by the 2nd column. So we know that our first query has 2 columns. Our second query can only have 2 columns so that we can do our injection. Does that make sense? Knowing that, we can craft an injection. The first column is going to be null. The second column, we'll just try it and see if it works. Let's just select version. And that's right out of the code as well in the handout. We're just going to see if we can do a union injection here. And it works. It gives us the 5 records plus the version of MySQL. And we saw this in our detailed network scan, so it makes sense. It actually makes sense. Now this is getting tedious. I don't need to see these 5 users every time. I want to see the second result set. I don't care about the first result set. This is what I want. This is the intel that I'm after. So we're going to change our injection to, rather than the OR, 1 is equal to 1, which will always test positive, we're going to change that to AND 1 is equal to 0, which means our first query in our union statement will always test 0. Then we can focus on the second part. This is a trick I like to use because, I mean, this is only 5 records, but imagine if it was a table full of 1,000,000 records. This would get real tedious after a while. So when I do this second injection, I didn't copy it. One sec here. Let me copy it again. Failed to copy it. Control C, Control AV. There we go. Much better. This statement here will always test negative. Then we can focus on the results of the second one. We still need to have matching columns, but it doesn't have any results in the first query. So now we can start changing. We'll go from version to database and see what that gives us. And this is why we use a text editor, because it's much easier to do that. Well, let's try user. Is that going to work? You know, I have to go back to my notes because I've forgotten. User.
You just missed that single code.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Ah, thank you. Much better. So the database is DVWA. I'm going to start capturing that intel. All right. The database is DVWA. Let's try user. Is it user or username? No, it's user. Google is your friend. Thank you for whoever caught my typo. The user is root. Again, huge issue. You should never be connecting to a database as the root level or hand of God access level into the database. That is just so wrong on so many levels. Okay? We know the database is DVWA. We know the user is root. We don't really know the table that we want. So let's try that next. The next thing we're going to try and look at is the tables. And this is where things get a little bit longer. And it's rather than user, we're going to select table names, table name from information schema. Wait a minute, one sec. I'm going to do a word wrap. Dot tables. All right. We're selecting the table names from the information schema dot tables, which is the system catalog equivalent in MySQL. You all remember from Oracle doing system catalog work. The same thing here in MySQL is information schema. In this case, information schema dot tables will return all the tables that we have access to. So we could limit it just to the database that we discovered earlier, but let's take a look. It's not tables name, it's table name. I can't believe I corrected myself and I still mistyped it. But again, very clear answers here. You don't want that, all right? And now we see all kinds of uppercase table names. Those look like system tables. We get down to guest book. We get a table called users. That's interesting. Let's take a look at that. There's other tables here. They kind of look like system ones as well. Accounts, that may or may not be a system one. But a lot of these tables, I don't know, man. Let's just start going through up here at the top. And spoiler alert, we're going to focus on users first. Now that we have a table name, let's now focus our attack on that table. Okay? That's fine. Okay. Before I can, and you could in theory do this. Select star from users and then comment it out. We could try that, but we have no idea how many columns there are in the users table. Chances are they're not going to match. We can try and guess and brute force what the column names are, but just like we pulled the table name from the information schema tables, we can pull the column name from the information schema columns where the table name is users. So let's do that instead. Okay? We're going to select null column name from information schema dot columns where table underscore name is equal to tick users tick. Just like that. And I'm going to verify to make sure I don't have any typos. Yeah, that looks right. So let's try that as our SQL injection. Look at that. User ID, first name, last name. We're almost done, by the way. User, password. We're after Intel. Let's grab the usernames and let's grab the password. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do, this would not have worked. So let's modify that from select star from users, select user, comma, password from users. Highlight that, make that my injection, and I did the or 1 equals to 1. Should be and 1 is equal to 0, or 0 is equal to 1. Let's try that so I can maintain the and that's what we want. Now, do those look like plain text passwords to you? They do not look like plain text passwords to me. So, I'm going to try and crack these passwords, and I could do it again. I could do a new notepad and copy and paste them over. But I want to show you one more thing before we do that. We have a style that we want to try and force these to use. So let's try and modify this known attack and make it a little bit easier to copy and paste from. We're going to select null, and we're going to use the concat function in MySQL, and we're going to concat user, comma, tick, colon, tick, comma, password. We're going to concatenate those three things into one string. This is all in your hand. I don't know if it's exactly like that, but now we have username passwords. And if you were doing an attack, and again you had a table with 1 million records, it is a lot easier to bring something like this into a text editor, remove the invalid characters, and just focus on the key bits that you want. Copy, paste. Copy, paste. Copy, paste. Copy, paste. And finally, copy and paste. And now I've got these username passwords that I can try cracking. Now, when we look at these, they don't look like regular SHA 256 or 512. They actually look like an MD5 password, and they are, but they're an old, simple, what's called raw MD5. And this is why we use Kali. This is why we use toolkits. If we were to take these username passwords and try and crack them in John the Ripper in Debian, it probably would not work. For this to work, you have to compile your own version of John the Ripper that includes support for legacy encryptions such as raw MD5. So what we need to do is we need to use this in Kali. It's one of the reasons we use it. File, save as, Metasploitable, and I'm going to call it dbwa underscore user db users dot text. It doesn't matter what you call it as long as it's a unique name. Oh, I hit find? What the hell? Control S, I must have hit the wrong. Go to Metasploitable and call it, I'm going to call it dbwa underscore dbusers.txt. Now that I have that, I go back to my shell, do another ls. There it is. And we can use John again. John dash format is equal to raw, I think raw underscore MD5. Is that the syntax? Just have to verify my syntax in my notes. Believe it or not, I don't have it memorized. Raw dash, not underscore, raw dash MD5. And then specify the file. dvwa underscore db users, just like that. Again, sudo bang bang, password, alrighty. Because I already ran it, it doesn't like that, so we're going to sudo rm, and this is why you log in as root. Always log in as root. And then let's try that again. And it cracks the passwords. Now what happened here, and I really wanted to cut you guys loose, this is what happened here, is that there was an existing session running somewhere trying to crack. Here it is here. John the Ripper is already running in the background. I should have stopped it here, and then I could have run it again here properly. That's usually the command you want to type in. rm-fr, your home directory in the .john directory. And that, more often than not, fixes all the problems that we have with John the Ripper. All right? So try and remember this command here. Sudo rm-fr your .john directory so that it can start a new John the Ripper session. Okay? And we get the passwords. Okay? Even ones that aren't that common. John the Ripper is a lot faster than a network attack. But a network attack, of course, is going to be a little bit slower. Any questions? Are your heads spinning at this point?
A little bit.
A little bit? Okay, I'm going to stop.